Every once in a while, a film comes along and surprises me, but this movie surprised me in a very bad way. British television director S.J. Clarkson's Madam Web attempts to shoehorn everything related to the Spider-Man universe into this movie without accomplishing anything noteworthy. The plot holes, lethargic acting, and lack of chemistry are indicative of a film without vision and understanding of the characters or any cohesive direction for its actors. Dakota Johnson plays Cassandra Webb, a New York City paramedic with abilities that allow her to perceive portions of the future. In doing so, she's forced to confront revelations about her past and protect 3 young women from a mysterious adversary who wants them dead. With a runtime of 116 minutes, Madam Web fumbles through exposition and what is supposed to be character development, resulting in a convoluted, half-hearted, poorly constructed film. But before we get to the review, if you enjoy this type of content, hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. Also, hitting the notification bell will alert you when we drop new content. If you've already seen the movie and don't need a recap of the events, feel free to skip ahead to the film commentary section of this review. Now, let's get critical. In 1973, a research team led by Ezekiel Sims and his pregnant colleague Constance Webb discovers a long sought-after spider with healing properties in the Peruvian jungle. Ezekiel betrays the team, shoots Constance in a struggle over the spider, and leaves her for dead. An indigenous tribe attempts to save her with the spider's bite, but she dies after giving birth to Cassandra. 30 years later, Cassandra, now known as Cassie, is a paramedic in New York City. After a near-death experience during a call, she begins to have visions of the future. Despite initially dismissing them as deja vu, she realizes her precognitive abilities after failing to save a colleague, O'Neill. Ezekiel, possessing limited precognition and enhanced physical abilities, tracks down 3 teenage girls, Julia Cornwall, Anya Corazon, and Maddie Franklin, believing eventually acquiring abilities themselves, they're destined to kill him. Cassie, drawn to the same girls, intervenes and takes them to a forest to hide. She discovers Ezekiel's identity and the true nature of his powers through her mother's notes. Despite Cassie's warnings, the girls go to a diner where Ezekiel finds them. Cassie temporarily incapacitates Ezekiel and takes the girls to Ben Parker's house in Queens. Cassie then travels to Peru, where a tribal chief conducts a ritual that gives her a vision of a higher plane of consciousness. She learns her mother sought the spider to cure Cassie of a hereditary disease. Back in New York, Ben's sister-in-law, Mary, goes into early labor, and they head to the hospital with the girls, who are spotted by Ezekiel. Cassie rescues them and lures Ezekiel to a firework factory, setting traps to disorient him. Although Ezekiel destroys their rescue helicopter and separates the group, with the use of her clairvoyant abilities, Cassie guides the girls to safety and sets off the final trap, which kills Ezekiel. A firework strikes Cassie, blinding her. At the hospital, she learns she is blind and paraplegic, but fully clairvoyant. Cassie assures the girls she will mentor them in their future roles. In the movie world, there are films that are bad, so bad they're funny, and then there's this movie, unnecessarily bad. It's not uncommon for most directors to have a couple subpar films. Any creative person worth their salt will have some duds. But Madam Web is notoriously bad. From directing to storyline to acting, the movie fails on almost every point. With an impressive list of credits including House, Dexter, Succession, and Orange is the New Black, one might assume S.J. Clarkson could handle a multi-million-dollar budget film involving a D-tier superhero. However, the directing and writing did not translate well to this film. The characters lack development, and the film moves at a dizzying pace, leaving unresolved threads and questionable direction decisions in its wake. Ezekiel's motivations and backstory from the time he takes the spider to when he crosses paths with Cassie 30 years later are never discussed. As a result, the audience has no connection to this villain. The powers and abilities are vaguely discussed and often used as plot devices, serving the characters whenever the script calls for it. For example, Sims can foresee his death at the hands of the 3 girls, but once Cassie intervenes and changes the narrative, he is unable to see his new future. Even Spider-Man had spidey senses and could have avoided being hit by Cassie driving that taxi. In the comics, Ezekiel has precognitive immunity, meaning he's blind to some or all forms of precognition. Therefore, how Cassie is even able to see him killing the girls is a mystery. Also, why is he never wearing shoes? The supporting cast looks and acts as if they're just there to get a paycheck, fully aware this film is a flop. The story shoehorns Ben Parker and Mary Parker, Peter Parker's mother, into the narrative despite their minimal relevance to the plot. If Cassie is clairvoyant enough to concoct a semi-plausible plan to rescue the girls from Ezekiel, but lacks the precognitive awareness to avoid becoming blind or paraplegic, then that needs to be explained. The film is written with a sequel in mind, leaving much to be desired, and even more unanswered. It's hard to decipher if this film failed due to poor timing or even poor decisions by executives. But one thing is for sure, this film is an unfortunate stain on all involved. I think a more compelling narrative would involve Cassie using her abilities to save people as a paramedic, honing them to the point where she can prevent major catastrophes. In doing so, she eventually prevents the murder of the 3 girls, much to Ezekiel's surprise. The movie could then branch off as they continue to intervene in each other's lives indirectly, using their clairvoyance to stay one step ahead of each other. Cassie continues to save others, but somehow always ends up needing to save the 3 girls or people close to them, thus creating a natural bond or relationship between the main characters. There are 2 hours to fill, yet I still don't know anything about any of these characters. This film was extremely difficult to get through. The comedic efforts fell flat, and the acting was cringeworthy and robotic. The characters were uninspiring and unrelatable. The writing and directing were incoherent and constantly pulled me out of the story, despite having ample groundwork to construct a halfway decent film. I will give credit to the production crew, makeup artists, stunt choreographers, gaffers, and others who had the monumental task of seeing this movie through to the end, but unfortunately, they're often the least compensated and recognized. Ultimately, I give Madam Web a critical rating of D.